My name is Dorothy Henderson, and I'm 54 years old. As I sat in the emergency room that night, cradling my bruised wrist, I kept replaying the moment my own son Brandon grabbed my arm and tried to force me to sign over my $400,000 house. The divorce papers from Robert were still fresh, the ink barely dry, when my firstborn child turned into someone I didn't recognize. But what Brandon didn't know was that I had already made my move 24 hours before he touched me. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you believe parents deserve respect, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, what happens next will show you why sometimes the strongest love requires the firmest boundaries. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. For 32 years, I was married to Robert Henderson, and together we raised 3 children: Brandon, who's now 28, Julie at 26, and Timothy, our youngest, at 23. While Robert climbed the corporate ladder, I built my own catering business from our kitchen table, working around school schedules and soccer games. Every birthday cake, every holiday spread, every client referral helped us save for our dream home. 15 years ago, we finally bought it. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in the Denver suburbs with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees. Back then, we paid $250,000, but the neighborhood had transformed, and similar houses were now selling for $400,000 or more. This house held our memories: holiday dinners, graduation parties, birthday celebrations. The kitchen where I perfected recipes that built my business. The backyard where the kids learned to ride bikes. 6 months ago, my world crumbled when I discovered Robert's affair with a coworker 20 years younger. The betrayal cut deep: not just the infidelity, but the lies, the secret credit cards, the trips disguised as business conferences. During our divorce proceedings, we divided everything. Robert got the catering business he'd barely paid attention to during our marriage. I got the house, free and clear. It seemed fair until Brandon learned about the property value. My oldest son had always been my pride. Eagle Scout, college graduate, the one who called every Sunday. But after his marriage to Melissa 3 years ago, something shifted. She came from money, or at least pretended to. Designer bags, luxury car leases they couldn't afford, constant posts about their fabulous lifestyle. Brandon's steady accounting job couldn't keep up with her appetites. The first hint of trouble came during a family dinner. "Mom, this place is way too big for just you," Brandon said, cutting his steak. "You could sell it, get a nice little condo, and have money left over to really enjoy life." I laughed it off. "This is my home, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Melissa chimed in, twirling her wine glass. "But think about it, Dorothy. All this maintenance, the property taxes. Wouldn't it be easier to downsize?" Julie caught my eye from across the table, her concern evident. Timothy focused on his plate, uncomfortable with the tension. Looking back, I should have seen the storm coming, but I was still reeling from the divorce, still believing my children would never betray me. Over the following weeks, Brandon's suggestions became more frequent. He'd drop by unannounced, always with Melissa, always with new reasons why I should sell. The neighborhood wasn't safe anymore. The house needed too many repairs. I was getting older and shouldn't live alone. Each visit felt less like concern and more like pressure. Then came the bombshell. Melissa announced she was pregnant. They needed a bigger place for the baby. Couldn't I help them out, just this once? The timing felt orchestrated, especially when I later learned from Julie that Melissa had been drinking heavily at a bar just days after this announcement. My maternal instincts warred with growing suspicion. Brandon's campaign intensified. He'd found the perfect senior living community for me. He'd already talked to a realtor about listing the house. He just needed my signature on a few papers to get the process started. When I refused, his mask began to slip. "You're being selfish," he snapped one afternoon. "Dad's starting fresh with someone new, and you're just sitting here in this museum of a failed marriage." Those words stung more than any physical blow could. This house wasn't a museum, it was my sanctuary, my security, my future. But Brandon couldn't see that. All he saw were dollar signs and solutions to problems he and Melissa had created with their reckless spending. Over the next 3 months, Brandon's tactics evolved from suggestion to manipulation. It started subtly, with guilt trips disguised as concern. He'd mention how hard Melissa was working despite her delicate condition. He'd talk about the baby needing a safe neighborhood, good schools, a backyard to play in. Every conversation circled back to the house and how I was standing in the way of his family's happiness. The pregnancy story became more elaborate. Melissa claimed complications that required expensive specialists. They needed money for medical bills. When I offered to pay the doctors directly, they always had excuses. The bills were already on payment plans. The insurance would reimburse them eventually. They just needed a loan against the house value. My suspicions grew when I ran into Melissa's sister at the grocery store. She seemed confused when I asked about the pregnancy, quickly changing the subject. I decided to investigate. Through a friend's recommendation, I hired a private investigator named Martin Cross. What he uncovered made my blood run cold. Brandon had accumulated over $80,000 in gambling debts. The online poker sites, the sports betting, the weekend trips to Vegas disguised as client meetings, it all came to light. Melissa wasn't pregnant. She'd been fired from her job months ago for stealing from petty cash. They were drowning, and I was their life raft. The manipulation escalated. Brandon started intercepting my mail, claiming he was helping me stay organized. Bills went missing. Bank statements never arrived. When I confronted him, he suggested I was becoming forgetful. Maybe it's time we looked into power of attorney, Mom. Just to help you manage things better. He turned my other children against each other. With Timothy, he played the older brother card, promising him $50,000 once the house sold. Mom doesn't need all that money, he'd say. We could all benefit if she'd just be reasonable. Timothy, fresh out of college with student loans, wavered under the temptation. Julie saw through Brandon's schemes but felt trapped. She worked as a nurse, had her own life, her own struggles. When she tried to warn me, Brandon threatened to cut her out of the family entirely. You're poisoning Mom against me, he'd accused her. The guilt and manipulation created rifts that broke my heart to witness. My neighbors began noticing changes too. Ruth, who'd lived next door for 20 years, pulled me aside one afternoon. Dorothy, I saw Brandon going through your mailbox yesterday. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was checking for important documents you might have missed. It didn't sit right with me. The isolation tactics intensified. Brandon would schedule family meetings at times when he knew Julie couldn't attend. He'd tell relatives I wasn't feeling well when they called. Slowly, systematically, he was cutting me off from my support system. The son I'd raised to value family was using those very bonds as weapons against me. The betrayal deepened when Brandon convinced Robert to support his position. My ex-husband, perhaps out of guilt or his own financial interests, began calling me. Dorothy, be reasonable. The kids need help. What's the point of holding onto that big house all alone? The man who'd broken our vows now lectured me about family obligations. One evening, I found Brandon in my home office, going through my files. Just looking for some old tax returns, he said, not even bothering to appear embarrassed. My personal documents were scattered across the desk. Bank statements, investment accounts, insurance policies, everything that detailed my financial life laid bare. Get out, I told him, my voice shaking with rage. Mom, you're overreacting. I'm trying to help you. By invading my privacy? By going through my personal papers without permission? He stood, towering over me. For the first time, I felt afraid of my own son. You're going to die in this house alone, and for what? Pride? Stubbornness? We're your family. We should come first. After he left, I sat in my violated office and wept. Not just for the son I was losing, but for the family we'd once been. The trust was broken, but I didn't yet know how much worse it would get. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked and my important documents in a safety deposit box Brandon didn't know about. That Tuesday morning started like any other until I heard the doorbell ring insistently. Through the peephole, I saw Brandon, Melissa, and a man I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I opened the door with the chain still on. Mom, we need to talk. This is Derek, a family friend who's here to witness our conversation. Brandon's voice held an edge I'd never heard before. I don't think that's a good idea, I started, but Brandon pushed against the door. Open the door, Mom. We're not leaving until we sort this out. Against my better judgment, I let them in. They filed into my living room like an invasion force. Derek, a burly man with cold eyes, positioned himself by the door. Melissa set up her phone on the mantel, claiming she wanted to record this for everyone's protection. Brandon pulled out a folder thick with documents. These are the papers to transfer the house deed. We've made it simple. You sign over the house, we'll handle the sale, and set you up in a beautiful retirement community. Everyone wins. I scanned the papers, my heart sinking. They weren't just transfer documents. Hidden among them were power of attorney forms, bank account access authorizations, even a statement claiming I was of diminished capacity. I'm not signing anything, I said firmly, reaching for my phone. I'm calling my lawyer. That's when everything changed. Brandon lunged forward, grabbing my phone from my hand. He threw it against the wall where it shattered into pieces. You're not calling anyone until you sign these papers, he snarled. Brandon, you're scaring me. This isn't you, isn't it? He laughed bitterly. You have no idea what we've been through. The calls from creditors, the threats, the fear of losing everything. And you sit here in your $400,000 palace while your own son suffers? I stood to leave the room, but Brandon grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin. The pain shot up my arm as he twisted, forcing me back toward the coffee table where the papers waited. Sign them, he commanded, pushing the pen into my other hand. Brandon, stop. You're hurting me. Melissa moved closer with her phone, but I noticed she was careful to keep Brandon's grip out of frame. Dorothy, why are you being so dramatic? We're just trying to have a family discussion. Derek stepped forward. Ma'am, I think you should listen to your son. He only wants what's best for you. The irony of this stranger telling me what my own son wanted while that son was physically assaulting me wasn't lost. I struggled against Brandon's grip, my wrist feeling like it might snap. Let go of me, I screamed, hoping Ruth might hear through the walls. Not until you sign, Brandon insisted, forcing me down toward the papers. In that moment, survival instinct kicked in. I remembered the panic button I'd installed on my keychain after the divorce. With my free hand, I managed to press it, triggering a silent alarm to the security company. Fine, I cried out. I'll sign, just let me go. Brandon released my wrist, and I cradled it against my chest. It was already swelling, bruises forming where his fingers had dug in. As I pretended to read through the papers, I kept them talking, buying time. Why Derek? I asked. Why did you need a witness? Brandon smiled coldly. To confirm you signed willingly, of course. No coercion here, right, Derek? That's right, Derek confirmed. Just a loving son helping his elderly mother make the best decision. Elderly. I was 54 years old, still running my life perfectly well, and these people were painting me as some feeble, incompetent woman who needed supervision. The doorbell rang, followed by loud knocking. Police. Open up. Brandon's face went white. What did you do? I protected myself from my own son, I said, standing despite the pain in my wrist. Melissa quickly grabbed her phone, deleting whatever she'd been recording. Derek moved away from the door as two officers entered. We received an emergency alert from this address, the female officer said, her eyes taking in the scene. Just a family disagreement, Brandon said smoothly. My mother's been confused lately. Is that true, ma'am? The officer looked at me, noting how I held my wrist. My son assaulted me trying to force me to sign over my house, I said clearly. I want to press charges. She's lying, Melissa screeched. We were just talking. Ma'am, do you need medical attention? The male officer was already calling for an ambulance. As the EMTs examined my wrist, I heard Brandon spinning his story to the police. I was becoming senile, he claimed. I'd imagined the whole thing. They were only trying to help. But my swollen, bruised wrist told a different story, and the officers weren't buying Brandon's version. We'll need all of you to come to the station, the female officer said. Ma'am, we'll take your statement at the hospital. As they led Brandon out, he looked back at me with such hatred that I barely recognized him. This isn't over, he mouthed silently. But what he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 2 weeks, ever since discovering the depth of his debts and schemes. The cameras I'd hidden throughout the room had captured everything, including the assault Melissa thought she'd cleverly edited out of existence. Brandon had no idea that in trying to steal my home, he'd already lost everything that truly mattered. 2 weeks before Brandon's violent visit, I sat in the office of Sandra Walsh, one of Denver's sharpest estate attorneys. The evidence Martin Cross had gathered spread across her desk painted an ugly picture of my son's desperation. "Mrs. Henderson, what your son is attempting is unfortunately common," Sandra said, adjusting her glasses. "But we're going to make sure he can't touch your assets." "I still can't believe it's come to this," I said, fighting back tears. "He's my son. I changed his diapers, taught him to ride a bike, celebrated when he graduated college. And now he's planning to rob you," Sandra said gently but firmly. "Based on these gambling debts and his wife's history, they won't stop until they get what they want. We need to act fast." The plan she outlined was brilliant in its simplicity. We would create an irrevocable trust and transfer the house into it immediately. I would sell the house to the trust for $1, making any subsequent attempts to force a transfer meaningless. The trust would have specific conditions that prevented the sale of the house unless I was actually incapacitated, determined by 3 independent doctors, not family members with financial motives. "But won't Brandon know when the deed changes?" I asked. "Not if we do this quietly. Public records take time to update, and most people don't check them regularly. By the time he finds out, it'll be too late." We spent hours crafting the perfect protection. The trust named Julie as the successor trustee, with Timothy as backup. Brandon was specifically excluded due to his demonstrated financial irresponsibility and attempts to exercise undue influence. The language was harsh but necessary. Sandra also helped me set up new bank accounts at a different bank, transferring my funds in small amounts to avoid attention. We changed my mailing address to a P.O. box and set up fraud alerts on all my credit reports. "Now, about documentation," Sandra said, pulling out another folder. "I want you to start recording everything. Every interaction, every threat, every suspicious incident." That's when she recommended the security cameras. Not the obvious ones, but tiny devices that looked like smoke detectors, picture frames, even book spines. We spent an afternoon installing them throughout my house, focusing on the living room where Brandon usually cornered me with his demands. Ruth, my observant neighbor, became an unexpected ally. When I carefully explained the situation, she was horrified but not surprised. "I knew something was off," she said over tea in her kitchen. "The way he's been sneaking around, going through your mail. My daughter went through something similar with her brother when their father died. Family and money bring out the worst in people." Ruth agreed to keep a log of Brandon's visits, noting times, dates, and any unusual behavior she witnessed. She even installed a security camera that happened to capture my driveway, providing additional documentation of his comings and goings. The private investigator, Martin Cross, uncovered more than just gambling debts. Melissa had a history we hadn't known about. She'd been married before, briefly, to an elderly man who'd died under suspicious circumstances. His children had contested the will, claiming undue influence, but Melissa walked away with a significant insurance payout. The money was long gone, spent on the lifestyle she couldn't afford. "Your son might not know about this," Martin told me during one of our meetings. "Or he might be willfully blind. Either way, his wife has done this before." Armed with this information, I reached out to Melissa's former sister-in-law, Caroline. She was eager to share her story, warning me about Melissa's tactics. "She isolated my father-in-law from everyone," Caroline explained over the phone. "Convinced him his children didn't love him, that only she cared. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. Don't let her do the same to you." Julie became my secret weapon within the family. While pretending to stay neutral, she recorded conversations with Brandon, capturing his admission about the fake pregnancy and his plans to declare me incompetent. "I feel terrible doing this," Julie confided one evening. "He's my brother. But what he's doing to you is wrong, and I can't stand by and watch. You're protecting me, sweetheart. That's what real family does." Even Timothy, initially swayed by Brandon's promises, eventually saw the truth. He came to me one night, shame written across his face. "Mom, Brandon offered me $50,000 to testify that you've been acting confused lately. I'm so sorry I even considered it." "Oh, honey," I pulled him into a hug. "He's your brother. Of course you wanted to believe him. What matters is that you're here now, telling me the truth." Timothy agreed to provide a written statement about Brandon's attempts to bribe him, adding another piece to our growing mountain of evidence. The final preparation was perhaps the hardest. Sandra had me write a detailed statement about my mental capacity, my understanding of my assets, and my reasons for protecting them. We had it notarized and witnessed by 3 independent parties, including my doctor who confirmed I was of sound mind and body. "This feels like I'm preparing for war against my own son," I said, signing the last document. "You are," Sandra replied. "But you didn't start this war. You're just making sure you win it." As I left her office that day, I felt a mix of sadness and empowerment. The mother in me grieved for the son I'd lost to greed. But the woman who'd built a business, raised 3 children, and survived a devastating divorce knew I had to protect myself. Brandon had forced my hand, but I held cards he couldn't imagine. The house he so desperately wanted was already beyond his reach. He just didn't know it yet. The morning after the assault, I sat in attorney Sandra Walsh's office with Detective Maria Rodriguez and my bruised wrist in a sling. The security footage played on Sandra's laptop, showing every damning second of Brandon's attack. "This is clear assault and attempted financial elder abuse," Detective Rodriguez said, taking notes. "The fact that he brought accomplices makes it conspiracy. We have more than enough to press charges." "There's more," I said, sliding the folder of evidence across the table. "My son has been planning this for months. We spent 3 hours going through everything, the forged documents Martin Cross had discovered in Brandon's car during surveillance, showing power of attorney papers with my signature clumsily copied from old birthday cards. The recorded conversations Julie had captured. Timothy's written statement about the bribe attempt. Ruth's detailed log of suspicious activities. This is one of the most comprehensive cases I've seen," the detective said. "Your preparation may have saved your life savings and possibly your life. Financial abuse often escalates to physical violence, as you've unfortunately experienced." "What happens now?" I asked. "We're arresting your son and his wife today. Derek Wilson, the supposed witness, has a record for similar schemes. He's looking at serious jail time and will likely flip on your son for a deal." As if on cue, Sandra's phone rang. She listened, then smiled grimly. "Brandon's at his office. They're moving in now. Melissa was just caught at the airport trying to board a flight to Mexico." "Mexico?" I gasped. "Apparently she had a backup plan that didn't include your son," Detective Rodriguez said. "We found $10,000 in cash in her luggage, probably from accounts Brandon didn't know about." By noon, the story had exploded across my family. My phone rang nonstop with relatives expressing shock, disbelief, and anger. Some directed at Brandon, some at me for involving the police. I let Sandra field most of the calls. Julie arrived at my house that afternoon, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry I didn't do more sooner. I was scared of Brandon, scared of losing my brother, but I should have protected you." "You did protect me," I assured her. "Those recordings you made were crucial. You were brave when it mattered most." The biggest shock came that evening. Robert appeared at my door, looking haggard and old. For the first time since our divorce, he seemed genuinely remorseful. "Dorothy, I had no idea it had gotten this bad," he said, standing awkwardly on my porch. "Brandon told me you were being unreasonable about helping family. He made it sound like you were hoarding money while he struggled. And you believed him without talking to me? I was wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things. When the police called me about Brandon's arrest, I couldn't believe it. Then I saw the security footage they showed me." His voice broke. "Our son assaulted you. In the home where we raised him. He's not the son we raised anymore," I said quietly. "Gambling addiction and a manipulative wife changed him into someone I don't recognize." Robert nodded, wiping his eyes. "The detective says there's more. That woman Melissa has done this before?" I shared what Martin Cross had discovered. Robert's face went from pale to furious as he learned about Melissa's past and her influence on our son. "I'll testify," he said firmly. "Whatever you need. Brandon called me constantly, painting you as selfish and possibly senile. I see now he was projecting his own greed onto you." The next morning brought another revelation. Caroline, Melissa's former sister-in-law, contacted Detective Rodriguez. She'd been following the news and recognized Melissa's photo. "Check your mother-in-law's medications," Caroline warned through the detective. After my father died, we found he'd been given 3 times his prescribed sedatives. Melissa had been drugging him to make him appear confused in front of witnesses. My blood ran cold. I rushed to my medicine cabinet, finding my blood pressure medication. The pills looked different, slightly larger. A quick call to my pharmacy confirmed my suspicion. These weren't my prescribed pills. Brandon had access to my medication during his visits, I told Detective Rodriguez. Oh my God, he was drugging me? We'll test these immediately, she assured me. If they're what we think they are, that's attempted poisoning on top of everything else. The test results came back positive for high-dose benzodiazepines, drugs that would have made me confused, compliant, and appeared mentally compromised. The very symptoms Brandon had been claiming I exhibited. His workplace had already suspended him pending investigation when the arrest became public. His boss called me personally to apologize, revealing that Brandon had been falsifying expense reports for months, probably to fund his gambling. The house of cards was collapsing faster than anyone could have imagined. Timothy came by that evening, bringing dinner from my favorite restaurant. I can't believe I almost helped him, he said, unpacking containers. Brandon made it sound so reasonable. He said you'd never miss the money, that you'd want to help your grandchild. There was no grandchild, I reminded him gently. That was just another lie. I know that now, but I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe my brother wasn't capable of something so evil. He paused, then added, I'm going to pay you back every penny he promised me, even though I never took it. I'll get a second job if I have to. You don't owe me money you never took, I said. What you owe me is a promise to never let greed cloud your judgment again. I promise, Mom. I swear I'll never let anyone hurt you again. As we ate dinner together, my phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. Brandon's bail hearing was set for the following morning. Melissa had already been denied bail as a flight risk. Derek Wilson had indeed flipped, providing detailed evidence of their scheme in exchange for a reduced sentence. The boy I'd raised, who'd once brought me handmade Mother's Day cards and promised to take care of me when I was old, now sat in a jail cell for trying to destroy me. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to steal my security, he'd lost his own freedom. And we still had the family reckoning to face. The courtroom was packed for Brandon's bail hearing. I sat in the front row between Julie and Timothy, trying to ignore the whispers from extended family members behind us. Some cousins who'd always been close to Brandon shot me angry looks, as if I were the villain for protecting myself. Brandon entered in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the confident man who'd tried to force me to sign away my home. His eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, found mine. For just a moment, I saw my little boy, the one who'd skinned his knee learning to ride a bike. Then his face hardened, and the stranger returned. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the defendant poses a significant flight risk and danger to the victim. Beyond the assault, we've discovered evidence of attempted poisoning, financial fraud spanning months, and a conspiracy involving multiple parties. Brandon's public defender argued for minimal bail, painting him as a desperate father trying to provide for his growing family. The pregnancy lie persisted even now. But when Detective Rodriguez presented the evidence, including the security footage and test results from my tampered medication, even Brandon's attorney looked shaken. Mrs. Henderson, the judge addressed me. Would you like to make a statement? I stood on shaky legs, Sandra's reassuring hand on my back. Your Honor, I'm a mother who loves her son. But the man who attacked me in my home, who tried to drug me into compliance, who conspired to steal my life's work, that man is a danger. He's sick with gambling addiction and under the influence of someone even more dangerous. I ask that you protect not just me, but him from himself. My voice broke on the last words. Brandon's facade cracked too, and he began to sob. But were they tears of remorse or just self-pity? I couldn't tell anymore. Bail is set at $500,000, the judge declared. The defendant will surrender his passport and have no contact with the victim. As they led Brandon away, he turned back one more time. I'm sorry, Mom, he mouthed. But sorry for what? Getting caught? The pain he'd caused? I'd probably never know. Outside the courthouse, the family drama exploded. Brandon's cousin Mark confronted me. How could you do this to him? Family doesn't send family to jail. Family doesn't assault and rob family either, Julie shot back, stepping protectively in front of me. You don't understand what he's been going through, Mark's wife added. The pressure he's been under. Pressure? Timothy's voice rose. He tried to poison our mother. He brought criminals into her home. Robert, who'd been silent until now, stepped forward. Enough. Anyone who wants to defend Brandon after seeing the evidence is welcome to post his bail. Otherwise, Dorothy has every right to protect herself. The family split into camps, some supporting me, others convinced I'd overreacted. Brandon's aunt suggested I should have just given him the money. What's family for if not helping each other? I would have helped him, I said quietly, silencing the group. If he'd come to me honestly about his debts, we could have worked something out. But he chose deception, manipulation, and violence. That's not asking for help. That's attempted robbery. Over the following weeks, more truth emerged. Melissa, desperate to save herself, revealed everything. She'd met Brandon at a casino, recognized his desperation, and seen an opportunity. She'd coached him on exactly how to manipulate me, based on her previous experience with her late husband. Your son was supposed to be different, she told Detective Rodriguez in a recorded interview I later heard. He actually loved you, which should have made it easier. But that love kept getting in the way. I had to push him harder, convince him you were the enemy. The gambling debts were real, but I exaggerated them. Told him people would hurt us if we didn't pay immediately. The fake pregnancy had been her idea, complete with doctored ultrasound images bought online. The plan to drug me came from her playbook too, though Brandon had resisted initially. She'd worn him down, convinced him it was the only way to save their future. He cried the first time he switched your pills, Melissa admitted. Said you looked so trusting when you took them. I told him tears wouldn't pay our bills. Listening to her cold recitation of how she'd turned my son into a weapon against me was the hardest thing I'd ever endured. But it also gave me clarity. Brandon was responsible for his choices, but he'd also been victimized by a master manipulator. At Brandon's sentencing hearing 2 months later, I gave another victim impact statement. This time, I spoke not just as a victim but as a mother. Your Honor, my son committed terrible acts against me. He betrayed the deepest trust between a parent and child. But he's also sick, an addict who fell under the influence of someone who knew exactly how to exploit his weaknesses. I ask the court to consider rehabilitation alongside punishment. I want my son to get help, to have a chance at redemption, even if our relationship can never be what it was. Brandon, who'd pled guilty to avoid trial, finally spoke. I destroyed everything that mattered for money that would have been gone in months. I let someone convince me that my mother's love was measured in dollars, not in the years she spent raising me, supporting me, believing in me. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it, but I am sorry. And I'm grateful my mother stopped me before I did something even worse. The judge sentenced Brandon to 2 years probation with mandatory counseling for gambling addiction, 300 hours of community service specifically with organizations helping elder abuse victims, and restitution for my legal fees. Melissa received 3 years in prison for her role, plus the outstanding charges from her previous victim's family. As we left the courthouse for the last time, Brandon approached with his lawyer. The restraining order had been modified to allow brief contact in legal settings. Mom, he said, tears genuine this time. I know I can't ask for forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm going to get help. Real help. And maybe someday, I can prove I'm still your son underneath all this. I hope so, I said simply. But that's your journey to take, not mine to guide anymore. Julie took my arm as we walked away, leaving Brandon standing on the courthouse steps. Timothy flanked my other side. My 2 children who'd chosen love over greed, protection over profit. The family I'd thought I'd lost had reformed, smaller but stronger. And that had to be enough. 6 months after the courthouse drama, I stood in my garden planting new rose bushes where the old ones had withered from neglect during the chaos. The house that had nearly torn my family apart now felt peaceful again, truly mine in a way it hadn't even during my marriage. Brandon had kept his word about getting help. He sent letters through his therapist, not asking for forgiveness or contact, just updating me on his progress. He joined Gamblers Anonymous, gotten a job at a nonprofit helping gambling addicts, and divorced Melissa while she served her prison sentence. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Julie had moved into the guest house out back, insisting I shouldn't be alone but respecting my need for independence. She'd found her voice through this ordeal, no longer the quiet middle child but a fierce protector who'd started volunteering at the elder abuse support group I founded. That support group had become my unexpected mission. What started as coffee with 3 other women who'd experienced family financial abuse had grown into a registered nonprofit with 50 members and counting. We met weekly in my large living room, the very space where Brandon had assaulted me now filled with healing and hope. The hardest part, said Margaret, a 70-year-old whose daughter had stolen her retirement savings, is that everyone says, "How could you not see it coming?" Like we're stupid for trusting our own children. Love makes us vulnerable, I replied, pouring tea from the service that had been my grandmother's. But vulnerability isn't stupidity. It's humanity. The shame belongs to those who exploit that love, not to us for feeling it. Our group had developed a system for protecting seniors before crisis hit. We brought in lawyers like Sandra to explain trusts and safeguards. Former Detective Rodriguez, now retired, taught us to recognize early warning signs of financial abuse. We created a buddy system where members watched out for each other, checking in regularly and noticing behavioral changes family might miss or ignore. Timothy had become our unofficial tech expert, teaching members about online security and how to spot scam attempts. His journey from almost accepting Brandon's bribe to becoming a protector of vulnerable seniors showed that redemption was possible for those who chose it. I could have been Brandon, he told the group one evening. The temptation was real, but Mom raised us to know right from wrong, even when wrong came with a $50,000 price tag. Robert occasionally attended meetings, sharing his perspective as someone who'd enabled abuse through ignorance. His talks on how family members could unknowingly become complicit helped others recognize patterns in their own families. I wanted to believe Dorothy was being difficult because it was easier than accepting my son had become a predator, he admitted to the group. My advice? When someone tells you a family member is being unreasonable about money, ask yourself who benefits from that narrative. It's usually not the supposed difficult person. The house itself had become a symbol of survival. I'd redecorated, not to erase memories but to create new ones. The living room where Brandon had grabbed my wrist now hosted joy, birthday parties for grandchildren of group members, holiday dinners for those estranged from their families, celebration parties when members successfully protected their assets from would-be exploiters. My catering business, which Robert had received in the divorce, had failed within a year without my management. But I felt no satisfaction in that. Instead, I'd started a new venture, catering specifically for senior communities and events. It kept me busy, connected, and purposeful. One autumn afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Caroline, Melissa's former sister-in-law, had driven from Wyoming to meet me in person. "I needed to see you thriving," she said, admiring the garden. After what happened with my father-in-law, I didn't think anyone could survive Melissa's manipulation with their life intact. I almost didn't, I admitted. But I had advantages your father-in-law didn't. I wasn't isolated, and I had time to prepare thanks to Martin Cross's investigation. We talked for hours, and Caroline agreed to share her story with our support group via video conference. Her testimony became one of our most powerful teaching tools about how predators operated and why early intervention mattered. As the one-year anniversary of Brandon's arrest approached, I received a request through Sandra. Brandon wanted permission to speak at a Gamblers Anonymous event about how his addiction had led him to betray his family. He wasn't asking to see me, just for my blessing to use our story as a cautionary tale. I thought long and hard before agreeing. Julie opposed it, still protective and angry. But Timothy understood. "Maybe hearing our story will stop another mother from going through what you did," he said. "Brandon can't undo what he did, but he can try to prevent others from making his mistakes." I gave permission through Sandra, with conditions. Brandon could tell the story but couldn't use my name or identifying details. Any money raised would go directly to organizations supporting elder abuse victims. He agreed immediately, grateful for even this limited chance at amends. The event raised $30,000 for elder abuse prevention. I didn't attend, but Timothy did, reporting back that Brandon had spoken with genuine remorse about how gambling addiction and greed had cost him his family. He said the house he tried to steal was worth $400,000, but he lost something priceless: his mother's trust and love, Timothy told me. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As winter approached, I found myself in a place of unexpected peace. The son I'd raised was finding his way back to the values I'd taught him, even if our paths would never fully converge again. My other children had proven their character under pressure. My home was secure, my future protected, and my purpose clear. During our last support group meeting before Christmas, I stood before 50 survivors and their supporters. They say home is where the heart is, I began. But for those of us who faced betrayal from those we loved most, home is also where we make our stand. This house that Brandon tried to steal isn't just property. It's proof that we can love without being victims, trust without being naive, and forgive without forgetting the lessons learned. The room erupted in applause, and I saw my reflection in their faces. Women and men who'd been told they were too trusting, too stupid, too stubborn. Survivors who'd chosen their own security over family manipulation. Heroes who'd protected not just assets but their right to live with dignity. That night, as Julie and Timothy helped me prepare dinner, I felt the ghost of the family we'd been before Brandon's fall. Different now, scarred but stronger, bound not by blood alone but by choices made when blood wasn't enough. "Mom," Julie said, stirring the soup that had been her favorite as a child, "do you regret any of it? How you handled things?" I considered the question, thinking of Brandon somewhere in the city, hopefully building a better life. Of Melissa in prison, paying for crimes both past and present. Of the family members who still thought I'd overreacted. Of the house that stood strong around us, shelter and symbol both. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally. "But I don't regret protecting myself. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim, even when the perpetrator is someone you'd die for." Timothy raised his glass of cider. "To Mom, who taught us that family isn't about taking whatever you can get, but giving what you can afford to lose." "And to both of you," I replied, raising my own glass, "who proved that blood may be thicker than water, but integrity is thicker than both." As we clinked glasses, snow began to fall outside, blanketing the world in fresh white. A new beginning, not just for me but for everyone who'd learned that protecting yourself wasn't selfish when the alternative was destruction. The house that nearly tore us apart had become the foundation for rebuilding what truly mattered: respect, honesty, and unconditional love with conditions on behavior. Because real love, the kind that endures, knows when to say no, when to stand firm, and when to serve justice, even when it breaks your heart to do so. Looking around my warm kitchen at the family I had left, I knew every bruise, every tear, every sleepless night had been worth it. I was Dorothy Henderson, 54 years old, and I had served my son the only justice that mattered, the kind that might one day save his soul while protecting my own. The house stood strong around us, $400,000 of walls and memories. But what made it priceless was that it remained mine, a testament to the truth that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is teaching someone that actions have consequences, especially when you're the one who taught them to walk in the first place. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have given in to keep the peace, or stood your ground even if it meant losing the child you'd raised? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please like this video and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Share it with anyone who might need to hear that protecting yourself isn't betraying family, it's honoring the first rule of love: you can't pour from an empty cup. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the strongest foundations aren't built on guilt or manipulation, but on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. Stay strong, stay wise, and never let anyone, even those you love most, make you feel guilty for protecting what's rightfully yours.